एक मिनट रुक जाओ, रेडी होने दो। चलो ये कर लेते हैं। This could be a great intro.
Hi, I'm Akshay.
Hi, this is Saurabh, and you are listening to the Founder Thesis podcast. We meet some of the most celebrated startup founders in the country.
And we want to learn how to build a unicorn.
Hi, my name is Chris George. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Qube Health.
I've said this a bunch of times. The last decade was software is eating the world. I think this decade is going to be FinTech is eating software. And there are FinTech approaches towards solving a variety of problems, essentially where the software part of it is just enabling the FinTech to happen better. And a great founder I'm speaking to today who is building FinTech for healthcare is Chris George. Chris has had a fascinating journey from starting up his very first venture when he was just 16 years old. And I don't even remember if I knew what is business when I was 16. After a bunch of successful ventures, today he's running Qube Health. Qube Health is essentially a FinTech full stack platform for healthcare. Qube Health helps companies to manage their health programs, be it insurance, be it a regular executive checkup, or any other kind of health and welfare programs for employees. And by acquiring companies, Qube Health builds relationships with employees and allows those employees to get access to a buy now, pay later or credit for their health expenses which are not covered by insurance, therefore allowing them to stay out of poverty in case of sudden unforeseen health issues in the family. I am super inspired by what Chris is building, and here's my conversation with him starting when he was 16 years old.
I enrolled for my first year BSc in physics. Interestingly enough, that was my epiphany. You can say my first epiphany in life. I've had quite a few. While I was pursuing that, my dad used to give me some very meager pocket money, right? I think it was like for an entire month, I think I had 500 rupees or something, which I thought was amazing. But but I was like, for 500 rupees, nothing is going to happen. Me and a couple of friends who were enterprising got together and said, listen, maybe we should organize some sort of a mini college festival or something like that, for some extra pocket money. That first event we did, it was a bit of a fashion show with some band and all of that kind of thing, a small scale event. Each of us netted about...
And you had like a ticket price on it? Like, how did you make money on it?
We basically went to Thumbs Up and got them to sponsor and, things like that. Sold tickets, literally going college to college into everyone. And, each of us netted 3,000 rupees, out of that event, which I thought was just like incredible, right? And it was like, oh my God, this is so good. You get money, you get recognition and all kinds of things like that. So that actually was my first step towards entrepreneurship. I was 16 years old and we incorporated a company in the event management space. So that was the start. Actually, from there, that business over the following year and a half did some of the more visible college festivals in Bombay. So IIT Bombay is...
Like you would pitch to a college that why don't you start a festival and we'll take care of the logistics, the sponsorship and the ticket sales. We'll do everything.
Yes. I mean, the colleges already had a festival. So we'd pitch saying that give us the production, right? So Bombay has a girls' college called the Sapphire.
This is like a fixed fees, or you would earn on ticket sales?
We'd earn on ticket sales, we'd earn on sponsorship, all kinds of things, like wherever we could. Bombay has Sapphire College, so they have a festival called Kaleidoscope. So we did the production for that. IIT Bombay has a rock event called Mood Indigo. So we did some stuff for that. We ended up partnering with some larger event management companies like Wishcraft and DM.
This is which year?
Quite some time back. Quite some time back. But I'll give you a time marker we actually did backstage production for Bon Jovi when he came to India, and Brian Adams when he came to India. So it was a glorious time. We had a great time. We were quoted.
You must have been like making like 40-50 lakhs a year or something from that, no? Like the organization, the
Well,
company.
I'm sure it was not that much, but it was very good. We thought we were rich, you know. But to be honest, more than the money, and I think we were still figuring out the one of the fundamentals of business, which is how do you price your business, right? How do you price your services? At that point in time, we were just taken away by the glamour. We were popular. People knew us. Or we'd go to different colleges and people knew who we were. And that was kind of fueling everything, right? So that kind of drove a lot. But more importantly, it taught us ground skills. How do you print a poster? How do you design a poster? How do you go sticker it up? How do you sell ticket sales? Dealing with the police, the permissions, actual hardcore. I truly believe even today that event management is one of the most difficult businesses that is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to be an extremely efficient multitasker to pull off an event.
Absolutely. So hats off to anybody who's in that business, across the board. We tried to graduate onto doing a bit of artist management. So we signed up a few local bands and, signed them up for gigs and stuff like that. So it was cool. It was good. I mean, those 18 months was actually a fantastic time for us. There were about four of us that were very closely involved.
Why did it end? Like, why only 18 months?
Yeah, so that's actually my second epiphany in life. So one of the friends from that group actually passed away, met with an accident and passed away. He had a motorcycle accident and went through stuff. And I started questioning. By this time, I was ending my first year BSc physics, and I started questioning life. I went back to my father and I said, I really don't know, what the hell am I doing with this BSc physics education? I mean, I really like it, but as a subject, but the kind of stuff I'm learning, I don't see the practical use of it, etc. And my dad said that, have you really thought about business? Because you haven't taken pocket money from me for like a year and a half now. You guys seem to be doing a bunch of things. Have you really thought? And culturally, that at that time, you may recall, it was like, oh, if you're a science student, if you downgrade to economics or commerce, you know. So my mom was like, oh my God, people are going to think you flunked or something like that, right? So I said, well, I really need to think. And that's when I said, okay, well, can I go for a business course? And of course, the IIMs and all were there, but, I couldn't get in there at that time. So I said, let me think about abroad. So I found out that the bachelor's in business administration course existed abroad. And, I told my dad that, should I apply? So my dad said, listen, I'll give you money for application fees. I'll give you money for the first semester if you're able to get through. Then the rest is on you. So, and this is at a time when the United States Education Foundation in India used to have a center, so students could go and do research in something known as Patterson Guide and stuff like that, right? So I did that along with another buddy of mine, and lo and behold, I managed to get through for my bachelor's in business administration in Texas. They agreed to transfer my credits from the first year BSc physics. So it was not like a waste or a drop year or anything of that sort. And they said, okay, great, come on over. And I was like, what? Wow, I managed to get through. So yeah, so that was, and then begins the second part of my journey.
So, like, what was it like, landing in Texas? And I mean, Texas is like not very multicultural, right? I mean, it's like, from what we've heard.
At least then, and the big cities have now gotten a lot more. I mean, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio are a lot more multicultural now. A lot of Desis there for sure, especially in Houston and Dallas. So it was bizarre actually. So here I am, 17 and a half, along with this other school friend of mine. Both of us had applied together. We managed to get through. the other side of Texas is that they're extremely polite and courteous. So we were walking to the bus stop, and random people, if they met your eye, they'd say, "Hey, howdy, how's it going?" And we used to not respond. And I used to tell my friend, "Does he?" I'm like, "Does he know you?" He's like, "How is he going to know me? Like I just arrived with you. How will he know me?" And then eventually we figured out, it was just polite conversation. So interesting things like that, or the fact that unless you're in downtown main city, you cannot raise your hand and just stop a cab. You have to actually call a cab. And we went around and we were like, "There's no taxis here, man. Like, how the hell do we do it?" Etc. Etc. But like I said, my dad agreed to pay for the first semester, which meant that I had to find a job in a rush. And I ended up getting my first quote unquote job in a petrol pump or a gas station over there, which was run by a Pakistani gentleman. And it was a petrol pump and a convenience store. So in itself, Mr. Riaz, as I still remember him, who taught me a lot actually. And my job was to, of course, manage the store. And he explained to me everything from inventory management, stocking, cash management, managing the inventory of the petrol and diesel that he used to sell, and so on and so forth. I had to switch to buses before I reached that particular location after university. So in the morning I used to go to college, and then afternoon I used to go there and work till late in the night, because you used to get paid a little above minimum wage by the hour, right? What I didn't realize is that that particular gas station happened to be in one of the most notorious neighborhoods in the city, which had a lot of gangland violence, actually. And you're 18 or so or whatever. So one night when I was walking back from there to the bus stop, you have these, you see in the rap videos, you have these low rider cars that go bouncing like this, with the loud music playing. It was unique to me. So I'm walking on the side of the road, and then this boom, boom, boom kind of stuff comes in. And I look over because I was just curious. And of course, these bunch of guys, young kids, I was young and they were younger, got out and they were like, "What the hell are you looking at?" And and I was like, "Oh my God." And clearly they looked like they wanted to pick a fight, right? So they basically got out, and I was like, "Nothing, nothing, nothing," and whatever. "No, no, what do you mean nothing, etc." It seemed like a scene out of Goodfellas or something like that. And this guy actually lifted his t-shirt, and he had a Uzi submachine gun, or at least something that looked like that. I was like, "Listen, it's okay." But here's the interesting story. Those guys would regularly come to the gas station to fill gas, and they eventually became friends because of an interesting thing. So our store used to sell, along with regular cigarettes and other stuff like that, BDs, right? The Indian BDs, right? And my boss had a great idea where he'd buy the BD pack, which is like, I don't know what's the price of BD now, but I mean that time I think it was like $1 or something like that. And you have like 20 leaf rolled nice tobacco bit, which is all legal and stuff. And he would sell each BD for $1. Right, so I mean, he was creaming the margin on this, and these boys he would sell it to them by saying that, "Listen, this is legal tobacco, so it looks like a illegal substance."
Yeah, it looks like a joint.
It looks like a joint, but in case you get caught, it's not going to show up because it's totally legal. It's totally, and they used to love this, right? So they used to come to buy this, and I'd give them a couple of BDs for free. So these guys, that original gang of gangsters, the local hoods, they all became friends because I spoke to my boss and I used to occasionally give BDs and a couple of beer cans, and they became quote unquote my protectors eventually. So that was an interesting experience.
How long did you work in that petrol station?
Oh wow! Oh, throughout my undergrad, I from Mr. Riaz's place, I moved to another Patel store, Mr. Bipin Patel, who was a local entrepreneur. He had 3 gas stations. He had like 2 motels and stuff. I graduated to managing all 5 of those properties for Bipin
while you were still studying.
while I was still studying, while I was studying in the store, because that's the only time I could get homework done, right? So great experience. Learned, inventory management, dealing with people, dealing with customers, multitasking,
Running a business, basically.
running a business, right? I mean, understanding the different types of people, the profiles. How do you literally? I mean, all of it. It was a great experience.
So, which year did you pass out?
So this was in the 90s, in the mid 90s, then from there I moved to New York to do my masters at NYU. So I did my MBA, and I moved to New York at a time when the what is now actually a very hip neighborhood called the Meatpacking District was actually the Meatpacking District, and I lived in Brooklyn. I consider New York still my second home after Bombay, because my formative years actually was there. And did my masters, and straight out of masters.
NYU is not easy to get into, right? Like
yes. Yeah.
What do you think helped you? Was it this experience of?
Most definitely. This experience in
because
itself.
They don't look so much at an academic score, right? As much as the.
That's correct, and I understood that as well. Eventually I did some summer working with the admissions office. So the kind of they used to look for personalities, right? I mean, you needed to have a story. So it was great, and it's a fantastic university, and especially Stern School of Business and stuff like that. It was a great thing. I did that. I again continued to work in parallel. Bunch of things. Straight out of campus, ended up joining a telecom company called Sprint Telecom, and I was part of the team that launched.
Was it SoftBank owned then, or?
No. It was independent. It was basically there was AT&T, Sprint, and WorldCom. Those were the top three telecom companies at that time, right? So so basically ended up joining Sprint Telecom. I was part of the team that launched their cellular service division called Sprint PCS on the East Coast. My professor recommended, and I ended up getting a great job there. Fantastic experience. I helped set up a 500-seat call center for them. And things like that. This was in the early days of the call center. Right? This is, and I still remember WorldCom and a couple of these companies. There was a company called Global Crossing that was laying the fiber optic cables that eventually became the foundation for outsourcing of call centers to places like India and Philippines and stuff like that. And we used to talk about how setting up a 500-seat call center in New York is so expensive, even though we chose the real outskirts of New York City. And then people said that eventually, you can actually move this somewhere else, which is what happened. So did that, and for a brief bit, about a year or so, and then moved to Bell Atlantic, another telecom company now called Verizon. And moved there to head what's known as value-added services, or VAS. Basically, it's just a fancy way of saying that you have to sell shit like call waiting and conference calls and all of that kind of thing to people. So did that, customized ringtones and stuff like that. So did that, and third epiphany in life, ended up coming to India coming back to India with a Shah Rukh Khan moment from Swades. Thinking that, boss, there's something happening in India, got to go back. That was actually in the year 2000.
Was it actually after watching Swades, or?
No. It was. I mean, I don't think Swades. Yeah, it was just a feeling, right? So I was like, gotta go and see what's happening. Gotta go. So that's what happened, and I came back to India.
Okay, then.
I came back and I reached out to my buddies. So 3 of the 4 founders, were doing different things. I met up with them. One of them happened to be working for Sony Music, And Sony Music was doing some amazing things, from Lucky Ali's Suno album that came out on the indie record side, which did fantastically well with O Sanam and things like that, to launching everything from Michael Jackson to various other Ricky Martin and Jennifer Lopez and stuff, right? So he was selling CDs and cassettes. And he was on the sales side, and he said, Chris, I mean, we were talking, right? I mean, talking about bands, talking about businesses and events and all of that. And he said, the music industry is the only industry, at least at that time, where distribution is a competitive advantage in India. Everywhere else, let's say if you have Michael Jackson signed to your record label, or let's say Justin Bieber, then you will make a lot of money because Justin Bieber will sell a lot. But in India, if your CDs and cassettes don't reach the store, it doesn't matter if you have Justin Bieber because you will never make money. And I was like, coming from the US and stuff, and, Amazon had started building its business. And I was like, that's crazy. Why don't we just do a mail order business? And of course, I had read about how Virgin started its mail order business and all of that kind of stuff. I said, we should consider Virgin Music, right? So we said, maybe I should consider doing this. So that actually helped create my first venture after coming back. The company was called Easy Buy Music, essentially selling CDs and cassettes online. It eventually became Easy Buy Store, which is probably one of the early versions of Flipkart. And they were basically just pretty much 2 or 3 .com e-commerce companies between the years 2001 till 2004. And we were what is known as a hybrid, meaning you could call on the telephone and order some stuff, from CDs, cassettes to books to, various games and whatnot. And
you had a call center also. That experience of call center would have helped here.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Actually, I think we were India's second or third company that got the toll-free number that they had launched.
But how did you fund all this? Like this would have needed upfront investment. No?
Absolutely. So actually, my dad helped me out by giving me, I think, 75,000 rupees or 80,000 rupees, and just to kind of pay for expenses. So that friend of mine and we went around to music companies. And an interesting thing is, like, the music industry in India or the film industry in India is a cartel, right? So either you're in the cartel or you're outside. It took me about a year to kind of get into that cartel, sign on all of the record labels. It's interesting that a lot of them are still friends even till this day, because once you're in the circle kind of stuff. And we started selling CDs and cassettes and all kinds of stuff and books across the country. But very soon, this concept called...
Was there a payment gateway at that time?
Cash on delivery. So we went and built a cash on delivery model, worked with ICICI Bank and First Flight Couriers and things like that. And, it was a fascinating time. But almost within the first year itself, we got picked up by a consulting firm called Arthur Andersen, which used to be there. Right. So Arthur Andersen... Pre-Enron days, correct. So Arthur Andersen India basically said, hey, look, we will help incubate your business. And I had no idea what incubate means, right? So they said, we'll help shape. But the great thing was, over the course of the 6 months, they architected the blueprint of the company, right? We started thinking like a big company. And company meaning we were just 2 people. It was me and my buddy. And they helped do the roadshow of raising funds. We actually ended up raising money from ICICI Ventures at that time in the year 2001, and raised a princely sum of $1.5 million at that time. And it was spectacularly bizarre to me, and especially my dad and his friends, saying that someone's just giving you money for you guys are 2 people, like, and what the hell, how are they doing this? How are they valuing the business and stuff like that? But that money actually helped us set up. And in about 9 months, we grew to about 160, 170 people across 8 cities, built out a team, and kind of scaled. We ended up actually being amongst the top 5 retailers, online or offline, for music products and stuff like that in the country. So rode that wave till about 2004, which is when the .com crash happened. And so everybody was shutting down. So I went back to the board and said, listen, what do you want me to do? I mean, we can still survive. We are making some money. Interestingly enough, what we had done was more than selling our own products. We built a e-commerce infrastructure that was powering some of the top 30 .coms in the country during that time. So between the year 2000 and 2004, if you went to Rediff, Sifi, ChaiTime, Bazi.com, and blah, 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 the backend more than likely was powered by us, right? So you buy there, but fulfillment was done by us. So that kept us afloat. But I went to the board and said, listen, what do you want me to do? So they said, look, I mean, we are taking a write down on all our investments. So if you want to shut down, we want this thing. So I said, you know what, that's bad karma. So if you're willing to be patient, I'll figure out something. So they said, okay. And so I ended up euthanizing the business, you can say. So brought it down from 170, 80 people down to 35 people. Most gut-wrenching experience ever, because you had to lay people off. You had to kind of talk the talk on that side, etc. And we said, what is it that we understand?
You reached this stage because you were out of capital. Like
we would have been out of capital in about 6 months. And this was 2004, right? And I think Flipkart started 2007. Of course, that particular board member and investor of that fund, very powerful lady now and a very close friend in the private equity space. Whenever we meet, she says, Chris, I think if you just hung around for 3-4 years, I mean, you could have been Flipkart, right? I was like, yeah, but if you guys had invested, continued to put in money, then maybe that would have happened, right? But anyway, hindsight, right? So we had runway for about 6 months, but we knew eventually we'd run out of money. So I didn't want to kind of be there in that situation. So paid people off, gave them some severance of a couple of months and stuff like that, and said, let's go back to the drawing board. What is it that we understand? We said we understand internet, we understand technology, we understand consumers, and we said, okay, with all of those ingredients, what is the other industry that can use these skills? And it turned out that marketing was becoming increasingly technology driven, right? People were like, I want to send out 1 million emails, I want to send out 500,000 SMSs, I want to track it all on a dashboard, etc., etc. So we said, all right, so that's what we will do. So we ended up building a business in what we used to call technology-enabled marketing services, digital marketing, or a new media company, whatever you may call it today. And basically said, okay, who needs these services? Who has these large volume transactions? So somebody said banks have a lot of money and they do a lot of transactions. So we went ahead and signed banks. So we went and signed HSBC Bank, ICICI Bank, etc. Did a lot of work for them, from everything from building the credit card rewards program to managing email campaigns to building web banners and all of that. Grew that business from that point. So by 2007 we were back to being about 100 people and scaling back up, and basically ended up at
that business was called EBS Worldwide.
That's correct.
That's okay, which is like Easy Buy Store. That
yeah. So someone said, is just make an acronym out of the name and let's get business going, right? So we built that, and as it turned out, ILNFS Private Equity, part of ILNFS, came in and bought out ICICI Ventures, and they made money on that deal. So they were very grateful that their patience in us was kind of rewarded. And we scaled up significantly from there. So we ended up doing 4 global acquisitions. We grew organically, inorganically, bought 2 companies in the US, one in Europe, another one in Delhi, and literally pounded the pavement. I mean, we went and basically reached out to head of marketing and said, listen, digital is going to be big. And they had some budgets, right? 10%, 20%. Now it's all together. There was above the line and below the line and all of those kind of terminologies, right? So we'd go and say, listen, we'll help you manage your below the line budget. And a lot of these guys were learning on the fly, right? And we were the cool guys who understood tech. And otherwise they were dealing with the agency guys. So building websites.
So what is the difference between above the line and below the line?
So above the line was considered mainstream media, such as news, newspapers, print, television, radio, outdoor. Broadly speaking, those were above the line. And below the line was direct marketing, emails, website, things like that, right? Now there is no line. Everything is one. what they call integrated advertising now, right? And of course, social media was just kind of building out at that time. So we did that in India, and we grew on the back of a lot of these brands. I'd love to say that we did something extraordinary, but what happened was digital moved from being 10% of an advertiser's budget to being close to 100%, right? So we kind of held on to that and we grew with it. Yeah, and we did interesting things like we worked with HSBC credit card rewards program. When we started working with them, they just had 100,000 cards issued. By the time we stopped working, they were like 4 million cards that they had. So we just had to kind of hold on.
If you like to hear stories of founders, then we have tons of great stories from entrepreneurs who have built billion-dollar businesses. Just search for the Founder Thesis podcast on any audio streaming app like Spotify, Gaana, Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to the show.
And why did you do global acquisitions? Was it like to get clients from outside India? Or?
Yes, I mean, and also for the cost arbitrage, right? So the whole idea was, I'll give you a very simple economics, right? We were building websites in India for 5 lakh rupees at that time, which we thought was a lot of money, right? And we realized that in the US, in New Jersey, they were making the same website and they were charging 50 lakhs, right? So in our head, and I mean, 50, close to 100,000 at that time, right? And in our head, we were like, boss, we'll just build a website in India and imagine the profit margins. Simple logic, right? So we raised capital to go and acquire companies over there, carve out technology, carve out design, carve out data processing, move offshore it to India, and then expand it. Once we did that, we realized that across the river from New Jersey to New York, the same website was being sold for 5 crore because $1 million is what they would charge, right? And we thought that was insane. So that's how we did this, string of pearls. Basically, we went and acquired these companies. So EBS Worldwide became a holding company, very similar to like a WPP or a Publicis, etc. And the intent was to create a digital holding company of sorts with these local assets across the world, including India, and leveraging the India cost base. And it had grown fairly rapidly. At that point, 2009 or so, 2008 or so, we were about 300 plus people. Fortune 1000 clients. There was a CEO for the Americas, CEO for Europe, and stuff like that.
What kind of top line?
We were about 50, 60 crores or so. And this was net revenue, not advertising revenue, right? Because in the agency business, there's a lot. So this is net revenue. And then Lehman Brothers happened. So we were like, oh my God, there goes this entire thing, capital is dry and all of that kind of thing. So, but it gave us an opportunity to actually focus on India, the India market per se. And that's what we did. Scaled the business to about 400 something people, close to about 77, 78 crores in top line. Then our board came back.
By which year do you think?
2011. Yeah. And our board came back and said, listen, we must do a micro IPO in India, and let's try and use that to try and get some liquidity and so on and so forth. I wasn't really sure.
What is a micro IPO?
So like a small size, 100 crore, 150 crore Indian rupees kind of an IPO.
But the process is the same as a regular IPO.
Exactly. So I went through the song and dance for about a year, met with all the bulls, or at least most of the major bulls, did the DRHP or the draft red herring prospectus, appointed the eponymous Crawford Bailey and Company as a law firm to kind of do this and stuff like that. Went through that process for a year, and I had my next epiphany in life. A couple of things were happening, right? So first is I started thinking, is this something that I really want to do, run a public limited company? Right? Because it's one of those tigers that you ride that you can't get off, right? If you run a public limited company and you're the promoter CEO of the company, you really can't sell those shares, because if you sell the shares, the stock price will crash. So you continue to keep building it. And at this point, I was doing this for about more than a decade. So I was like, okay, is this something I really want to do? In parallel, I was very involved with the startup community in India. So I've been a founding charter member with TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs, the organization. So I was doing a lot of work with early entrepreneurs. I used to sit on the advisory board of IIT Bombay's incubator for about 4 years. So I was like, what I really like is taking a company from zero to maybe, 200, 300, 400, but I'm not sure I want to take it from 1,000 to 10,000. So I went back to the board and said, look, I know we've put in a lot of time and effort. I don't want to do this. Let's figure out a way to get you an exit. So in 2012, 13, that's what we did. We sold the business in bits and parts because we were a holding company. We had different assets to a bunch of clutch of investors and so on and so forth. And basically, stepped out of the ring. Decided
who bought the India business?
So there were a clutch of private investors who merged it into other businesses and stuff like that. So it was not like a large institutional and announcement kind of stuff. Which again, in hindsight, because we were a holding company structure, it was a lot more complicated per se to kind of do that. But decided that I was going to move to Singapore and start doing angel investments and figuring out what I can do there and stuff like that, right?
How much liquidity did you get from this exit event?
I mean, decent. I just want to say decent. I don't want to mention the numbers, but it was decent enough for me to think about, just spending the following years investing basically becoming an angel investor. And so that's what I did. I moved to Singapore and said that that's what I was going to do. So I set up a fund along with a few friends, did some angel investments both in India and the former Soviet Republic, so in the Russian continent. So
why? I mean, like, you had no exposure to that market. What made you want to invest there?
So the logic was, Russia across the entire former Soviet Republic, while there are different countries, the common language is Russian. So it's like the English-speaking population, right? So the common language is English, but the local languages might be different. They had demographics which was very similar to India. A lot of young population, internet penetration was significant, and so on and so forth. So all of the arithmetic around it or the thesis around it made sense. And essentially, they were cloning businesses from mature markets. So the idea was invest in clones and then figure out kind of move in that direction.
The rocket internet strategy.
Rocket internet model, absolutely, the Samvar brothers, right? So that was the idea. So we did about 3 investments in a couple of those areas, and then I also invested in India. And as it turned out,
what were your Indian investments?
So invested in this company called First Moms Club, which is the largest community of Indian mothers in the world, and it's still operational. And Ruchita does a fabulous job. She's a founder or CEO of running that business. Another one was a company called Digital Republic, which is still operational. It's an agency business. It's actually, full disclosure, it's run by my wife. And the other investment I did was this healthcare company called Qube Health, which I now run. So my next epiphany in life happened where my father was actually diagnosed with cancer. So that kind of laid the foundation, so to speak, the genesis for Qube Health. But I'll take a pause and let ask me some questions and then jump into the
No, this is pretty fascinating. Let's just continue with that. I don't have any questions. I keep interrupting you when I have questions. Don't worry about that.
So, I reached out, needless to say, any family that has undergone, a health condition like that, you kind of get exposed to a lot of things, right? I reached out to my dear friend who's also the co-founder of Qube Health, Gagan Kapoor, and I said, listen, boss, can you help me?
No, but what was the pain you saw there that made you...
I'm coming to that. Yeah, I'm coming to that, right? So I said, Gagan, can you help me? Dad's got this, find good doctors, good hospitals. What should I be doing? Insurance, etc., right? As it turned out, Gagan's father-in-law also was suffering from terminal cancer. So he and I have known each other for 20 plus years, but we happened to reconnect at a time when both of us were kind of having a common, situation in our personal lives. His family, and let me first kind of tell you his background, and then I'll segue into the response to your question. So Gagan actually spent, over 10 years with Ernst& Young, setting up their private equity group. Subsequently ran a private equity fund called Argonaut. He was the country head, invested both in public and private markets. And then he was called back to his family business, which was India's second largest insurance TPA, or a third party administrator, right? They run the back office for the insurance companies. So it was the second largest one, and he was running that. And so father-in-law said, listen, why don't you come and take this over? Run it until my passing, and once I'm no more, then you can eventually sell the business and then kind of do all of that. And Gagan did a fantastic job, expanded it to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, 7 countries in Africa, and all of that. But through that process, understood the healthcare insurance business and also the healthcare business in general. The pain point for me was like a pain point for any other Indian, which is number one, that insurance doesn't pay for the entire healthcare. Right? Even after 35 years today, insurance penetration in our country is less than 25%. So 3 out of 4 Indians do not have insurance, or if they have, they are usually underinsured. Which was the same case with my family. Health insurance was always a tax saving measure. It was never to mitigate risk or whatever. Your chartered accountant will advise you that this is something you must do to save tax. So, needless to say, you start thinking about spending from your pocket. And the way you think about spending from your pocket is you spend from your savings or your borrowings. That's how Indians pay. So basically, you are either underinsured or uninsured. Borrowing is very common, but it is expensive, either financially or emotionally. And more importantly, this entire relationship between you and the healthcare providers is a David versus Goliath kind of situation, right? It's very high friction, pain in the ass, and it's one of those only industries where the payer doesn't have any power, right? I mean, in retail, in hospital, take it or leave it. I mean, in retail or any other industry, in hospitality, if you are paying, they treat you that, hey, that's my customer, I need to really take care. But in healthcare, the power rests with the recipient of the money. And that was the pain point, for me. I was like, this is ridiculous. First, I don't have choice. It's easier for me to find a hotel or a restaurant to go to than to find which hospital or clinic I should go to. That's just bizarre, right? I don't have a comparison platform. I don't have choice. And the only way I have to pay is pay from my pocket. And I have to pay whatever they tell me, and I have to pay 100% upfront. It's not on services delivered, So fortunately, because Gagan happened to be in insurance, and they being the second largest TPA, he understood how healthcare pricing works. He understood that when they charge you 2 lakh rupees for a procedure, what does that mean, and what is their real margin? I managed to get a great deal. Touchwood, my father is doing well, and he's living with it. But he's gone through procedures and stuff like that. But he's all right. But that journey really taught me the pain point of an average Indian, right? And I didn't come in from the healthcare industry, as you know. So therefore, for me, I was dealing what everyone else in India deals with. Perhaps not as worse, but at least to a great extent. So Gagan and I basically said that, listen, healthcare in India has gotten sophisticated. There are better hospitals, etc., in private that are available, but it's equally gotten opaque and it's gotten expensive. We need to figure out, we need to do something to bridge that gap. So essentially, how do you bridge the gap between what the health insurance actually pays for and what the actual healthcare expense is? So we started digging deeper. Here, I'm going to throw some statistics at you, right? Over 70% of an average Indian's healthcare expense is paid from their pocket, which means paid from their savings or their borrowings. It's the single biggest reason why Indians fall below the poverty line every year. Right? The single biggest reason. COVID has accelerated that. Over 5.5 crore Indians actually dropped from middle class to poverty straight off. And these are working class people, right? So when you look at the population of this 1.2 billion people or so, 500 million of us are employed in some way, right? Self-employed, working for the government or private. The rest of the population depends on either these employed individuals in your family to pay for healthcare, or you depend on the government, right? So if you depend on the government, you're depending on all kinds of government schemes or government hospitals. But because as a country, historically, we have not invested enough in healthcare. Private healthcare kind of has come in and filled that gap, right? Which means healthcare has gotten expensive and it will continue to get more expensive, right? So we said the employed Indian essentially depends on their employer to take care of their healthcare needs. Uh, and the employer basically says, while you're working for me, I will give you a group mediclaim or what's known as group health insurance, right? Because that's a necessary part of your CTC or cost to company of your employment. So I'll give you that. So the employed Indian goes through life thinking, I have an insurance bit that my company pays, and until they actually have a need. Once they have the need, they start calling up HR and saying, listen, you mentioned I have a group mediclaim, now I want to claim. And then that's when you realize that that insurance is going to pay for less than 30% of your actual healthcare expense. And there are 1,000 different conditions and inclusions and exclusions and all kinds of nightmare. Majority of Indians have experienced that now during the COVID period. Okay. And you realize that how severely underinsured you are. Now, if you are educated and perhaps senior management, you may augment that by getting a private policy of your own. But that percentage is literally in the minuscule single digits. So majority of them go through their employed life thinking, okay, we will see. If there is something, oh, insurance doesn't pay for it, chalo, theek hai, savings were made for this. By the time you retire, you realize that, oh, now I am exposed. I don't have group mediclaim. And it's too late or it's too expensive to get an insurance policy now, which means you spend the balance period of your life wiping out your savings to pay for your healthcare. Classic story of every Indian, right? They spend their lifetime savings on their own healthcare needs. The interesting thing is the group mediclaim, the average mediclaim cover per employed Indian is just 3 lakh rupees, right? Which, as you can imagine, doesn't pay for anything. It usually covers just the individual, spouse, 2 kids, and maybe 2 parents. Leaves out any other family member or anybody that you consider as family. And of course, if one of them ends up claiming, which means that most likely your senior citizens in your family will, it will like leave the other people exposed and so on and so forth. So that became the genesis of Qube Health, solving and bridging the gap between healthcare insurance payments and the actual healthcare expense. How do we put the power back and change the way India pays for healthcare? So that was the idea, basically. So with that in mind, we said we need to do 2 things. Number 1, we need to create a marketplace. Number 2, we need to acquire users. And once we've So the health service providers such as hospitals, clinics, diagnostic centers, etc. So if we can aggregate everybody onto one platform, and on one side aggregate all the users, that is essentially the employed Indians who can pay for healthcare. Now you have 2 sides to the marketplace, the buyer and the seller. And then you play the role in between of enabling the transaction. And when you enable that transaction, essentially you're able to control the flow and the experience and so on and so forth. So we spent about 14 months, went around the country using Gagan's relationships, aggregated over 11,000 hospitals, clinics, and diagnostic centers, arm twisted them using charm and whatever other means that were available, and convinced them to give us...
Done to Bhav that.
Yes, correct. Done to Bhav. And got them to give us discounts of the rack rate of different kinds of healthcare services, and went around the country and started signing up corporates with a simple promise. We went to the HR teams and said, are you spending on employee healthcare? And needless to say, they said, yes, kuch karte hain hum, we do something. And we said, okay, great. I'm going to, number 1, make your life easy in healthcare administration. You don't need to do a beauty contest of different providers. You deal with me. I will take away the headache. HR guys loved it because they don't necessarily like doing this. It's not a domain expertise area for them. So we took that over. Number 2, we told them that we will give you one price, lowest price guarantee on any healthcare services across the country. So if you're a multi-geography company, Delhi, Bombay, blah, 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 etc., you don't need to deal with SRL labs in one place, Apollo in another, or Medanta or whatever. You just deal with me. I'll give you one price, one billing, lowest price guarantee. If you find anything cheaper, we'll match it. And number 3, we'll tech enable the whole experience. So on your dashboard, you will know everything about how your organization health is and who's healthy, unhealthy, and therefore you can run programs. So we incorporated that business in November 2019 as Qube Health.
Okay. Gagan left at that TPA which he was running?
So as I mentioned, his father-in-law actually passed away, and so he eventually sold that business to MediAssist, which is the number one TPA in the country right now, and he joined full time. So both of us got together and put together a team. Pankaj, who's our chief operating officer right now, joined us, and so I started focusing on building out the technology and the customer sales side. Gagan started focusing on aggregating everything, and we incorporated the company in November 2019 as Qube Health, and we said let's build the business in two parts. First, let's build the customer base, and second, we will enable and control the transaction flow. We now work with over 150 corporates across India, through whom we manage 1.5 lakh or 150,000 employees of those companies. We are on track to double that number by March. We work across 6 industries, from food services, manufacturing, IT-enabled services, financial services, and so on and so forth, with some of the biggest brand names in the country. And the average size per employer is about 1,000 employees, where we go in and take away the headache of employee healthcare and workplace healthcare management for these HR people. Everything from pre-employment health checkups to annual health checkups, vaccinations, you name it. Anything related to employee healthcare, we do that. And we complement any existing health insurance policy that they may have. So typically we will work with the insurer or whatever to fill the gap that the employee does not have. Because of that, now we have relationships with these employed Indians. And because we have those relationships, needless to say, we want to give them a marketplace. But by just giving them a marketplace is not enough, because the single biggest pain point, based on what I mentioned earlier, for every Indian is not necessarily to find the right medical care. It's about how do I pay for the medical care. So what Qube Health does is we offer pre-approved, no-cost EMI to individuals to pay for healthcare. So 0% collateral-free, buy now, pay later healthcare. So what happens is, as an employee of an organization, let's say I come to...
There would be an interest component in it, right? Or you don't charge interest?
We don't charge any interest at all. So it's interesting, again, in our country, that you can actually buy a 0% interest cell phone or a no-cost EMI washing machine, but there is nothing like that for healthcare, which is really, really sad, we think. If you want to buy a new television right now for your home, you can walk into a Chroma, immediately convert that into equated monthly installment at no cost and take away. But you can't do for your cataract operation. You can't do that for your angio, right? And that is the product that we've built. We offer a pre-approved credit line of up to 10 lakh rupees, 1 million Indian rupees per employed individual through their employer. So it's deployed through the employer. There is no liability on the company. And the individual essentially downloads our app, and they also get a physical card, which is like a regular credit card, except there is no interest. And you can walk across anywhere in the country as long as it is health and medical. And you can just scan like you do Google Pay or you do Paytm or whatever, or you can swipe your card and literally take, let's say you're spending 1 lakh or 100,000 rupees on a particular procedure, just convert that into 10 installments of 10,000 rupees each. No questions asked. You don't need to think about calling up a call center, should I swipe, whatever. So whether it's an emergency or whether it's a planned procedure, whether it is elective procedures, meaning dental, eye, skin, assisted pregnancy, veterinarian, or you name it, as long as it is health and medical, you can use it to pay for anybody that you call family. Now, when you say you call family, meaning it could be boyfriend, girlfriend, father-in-law, mother-in-law, grandparents, it could be your dog, it could be a favorite uncle, anyone that you are willing to pay for. So we've deployed that product actually just a few months ago, and it's rapidly becoming one of the fastest buy now, pay later, the FinTech in health tech, so to speak, businesses in itself. Yeah. So that's our journey so far.
So now I have like a whole bunch of questions. Um, let's first start with the B2B side of it, the employer onboarding part of it. So you tell an employer that we'll take care of everything. So is this like a automated algorithmic self-service approach, or is there like a account manager who understands what they need and then builds a offering based on what that employer
Yes,
needs?
the latter actually. Because healthcare is a very high touch business, right? And so the more you speak to someone, you talk to someone, the better it is. So this falls in the category of employee health benefits, which the companies actually do that either because there is a government regulation around it. So certain industries, the government expects that you provide certain healthcare benefits, checking employees for communicable diseases, statutory compliances, etc. And then there are other companies that do this because it's a good HR strategy, right? I mean, to show your employees that you care. So they have what is known as out-of-pocket expenditure on employee healthcare, meaning where the company has let's say, you work for a bank and the bank will say, I will spend 2,000 rupees per employee per year to get an executive health checkup done in a very simplistic sense. So they will tell you that, hey, Akshay, up to 2,000 rupees, if you go and do a health checkup, we will reimburse that money. But healthcare is a very boring topic, right? Most individuals don't like to do something about it unless something happens. HR, for HR, it's just a checkbox because it's one of those KRAs that they're supposed to do. So what ends up happening is less than 5% of an organization actually avails of this benefit, right? Number one. Number two, it's a nightmare because the industry is a cartel. It's opaque, and so on and so forth. Discovering price, discovering options, all of these things are impossible, let alone for the individual. Imagine the HR, right? The HR is like, gosh, I'm supposed to do this, health event across all offices. How the hell do I find out which lab to go to, which hospital, whether the pricing is right? And somebody will come and sell you a gold executive health checkup package, and you're like, what the hell does that mean, right? So things like that. So we go in there, understand gender, we understand demographics, we understand age, and curate healthcare packages. We look at past claims data on insurance, and actually curate these packages. But to be honest, for us, apart from simplifying healthcare management for organizations, which we do, we reduce their cost, we bring in their efficiency, make the employees feel like they care. It's ultimately about solving the problem for the individual, right? The corporate acts as a ways and means for us to reach that, to acquire that relationship. Once we
acquire customers in bulk.
Exactly, correct. Once we acquire those relationships, we understand better about that individual, and we realize that individual doesn't care so much about their own health, but they care for their family's health, right? So if I came and told you, Akshay, you must go undergo a health checkup, you'll be like, yeah, okay, I know it's important. But if I came and told you that, hey, listen, when was the last time you underwent a health checkup for your parents? You'd be like, oh, okay, I want to hear more. And so that's the bit. And then the natural progression of that would be where you'd be like, okay, can you help me pay for this?
Right. So when you onboard an employer, does every employee of that company then download an app from where they get to know what all am I entitled to, and then they get maybe a notification that your health checkup is due or stuff like that? Okay. So you help HR also manage that pushing of policies and sending communication that you must get this done.
Completely.
Okay.
Completely.
So for
it, we do a hybrid of WhatsApp and the app as well. So we take over the communication and the relationship management, right? So let's say we sign up with your organization, you'll get a WhatsApp message saying that, hey, your company cares for your health, and they've organized a health checkup for you. And it doesn't matter whether it's at home. Or you can go to the nearest, diagnostics lab within a 5-kilometer radius. Or if you want it even more convenient, the lab will come to your office. So in a conference room, we set up the lab. Now, in such a situation, you really have no escape, right? You're going to get the health checkup done. Once your health checkup is done, all of your health records are available on the cloud in our app. It's not the boring medical looking PDF report. It actually tells you, hey, Akshay, your sugar shows borderline. Do you have a history of diabetes in your family?
how do you get that? Then your the vendors need to then upload it in a certain format. Like, how do you get this?
Yeah, so we plug into the backend, the lab information systems and the hospital information system. And so all of that raw data is kind of taken in. We are actually part of what is known as the NDHM in India, which is the National Digital Health Mission. Which the government has put together, something similar to a UPI for payments. So a unified code, which is part of Ministry of Health and Welfare of our country. So as a result, all the data is secure, is GDPR compliant and data secure and so on and so forth. But what it does is using AI and data sciences, start finding patterns in that data and then recommend to you how you can live a healthier life and so on and so forth.
Oh, amazing. So for an HR manager, this dashboard is like the only thing he needs to do with respect to health. He'll just click there and the employees get notified. So, but how do you... So this is not like a pure marketplace for you, right? This is more like because you would charge something fixed, and then maybe in some cities you would have a higher margin, some cities may be at loss and all that. So that then you further then negotiate and run the execution for that.
Absolutely. I mean, because we understand pricing, right, of these things. So let's say you do a complete blood check, right, or a CBC test. We understand price of a CBC test across the country. We understand it at a unit level. And the intent is that, right? How do you standardize pricing? How do you standardize pricing for the user? Today, if a elderly person in your family needs to undergo a cataract operation, why should the price in Delhi be any different than in Bombay? Significantly at least, right? I mean, there might be some variance. I mean, you can go and have, sushi at multiple restaurants and the pricings will be different. But by and large, there is some sort of a mental parity that you have, right? You understand why, a Michelin star restaurant will charge you a particular amount and, a regular street vendor would. But in healthcare, that doesn't exist. It's completely arbitrary. And the intent is for us to kind of standardize that. And it begins with that. And then once you throughput enough volume and once you control the transaction pipe, then you start doing it more and more and more.
So a lot of your tech from an enterprise side would essentially be about empowering the account managers who work with these corporates to help them create the right package or help them price it in the right way. Like they would be able to see average price across the country for something and then add a markup and then give a quote and stuff like that.
Actually, we simplify it even further. There is a standard rack rate. So, I mean, for example, for health checkups, we have 1,510 different types of health checkups that are tagged in our system. So there's a standard price across the country, right? We have over 3,000 something diseases that we track. So on the basis of that, there's a price. The intent is to get to a self-serve model on the HR side at some point in time. But like I said, healthcare is a very involved, bit, and they want to talk to someone. Let's take, for example, mental health, right? Organizations now, especially post the lockdown, want to measure their employee and their, index, if you will, on depression, anxiety, and stress. So for them, it's about how do I know how my employees are doing mentally? And they want to talk to someone so that they can implement a program. Now, let's say you've implemented the program, which is a simple testing score, an anonymized, personalized. Employees answer a bunch of questions sitting in the comfort of their homes, privacy of their homes. And on the basis of that, the employee comes to know their own individualized score, but the organization comes to know a averaged anonymized score. So if the HR and the CEO knows that the majority of the percentage of your people are leaning towards anxiety, now you can run programs to address that in your population, right? So your organization health index can get better. These require conversations with an account manager so that they can guide you in the right direction.
Right. And what about from the supplier side? Like, once, say, there is a certain thing to be done, then are the suppliers like totally automated in that process, or would someone call them and say, okay, we need to run this, and what's the rate you'll give me, and like how does that happen?
Sure. So I mean, to be honest, this is India, right? I mean, so a big percentage of it still happens offline because it's very relationship driven. But to be fair, a lot of the modern hospitals, clinics, etc., they are getting extremely automated, and the fundamental infrastructure has been laid through lab information systems and health information systems, etc. So we can plug that in. So it's a hybrid, I would say, but it's still a very relationship-driven business. We have relationships with all the big brands in the country, and because of that, somebody on the operation side will kind of plug in. More importantly, for the providers being a general term for health service providers, right? We are a demand generator, right? We are a channel to sell more. We get them customers, we get them curated customers, and we also finance the transaction. So it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, if I'm a hotel and somebody comes and tells me, listen, I will bring you 50% of your entire sales and I will finance those guys so that they buy now, pay later, I'd be doing cartwheels and saying, hey, look, tell me what you need. And that's an important point. So we want to get the provider to ask us saying, hey, look, what do you need from me? And our simple response is, what I need from you is for you to treat my customers well. When a Qube Health user comes to you, treat them the same way you will treat a rich sheikh coming from the Middle East to your hospital or clinic for a treatment, right? Because if you don't, then I'm not going to give you more customers. It's as simple as that.
It seems to me like a good path forward would actually be for you to raise large rounds and acquire these providers. Because if you really want to have control over the customer experience, then probably that would be the way to go. Is that on your radar? Like,
two-part response, right? So first part, yes, we are as on tomorrow hitting the ground for our Series A. So naturally the intent is to kind of build scale significantly because we are on a rocket ship right now. We've been growing over 150% quarter on quarter. And so we're just kind of holding on to the rails, so to speak. So we need to do that. And the time is now. So therefore we are kind of doing that. No on acquiring the providers. It doesn't make sense for us to acquire the providers because for us, the focus is the user, the customer, right? So any kind of investment that we are doing is on making that experience friction-free. On the provider side, I'm running a marketplace like Amazon, right? So all I'm interested in is working with each of those providers to better the experience, right? And so let me give you a vision, right? So imagine a scenario where it's broken down into three parts. Transforming the front door access to healthcare for the user. So we are the first person you think of to call and access whenever you have anything related to healthcare, emergency or non-emergency. Number two, transforming how you pay for healthcare. You walk into any clinic, any hospital, you whip out your card or your phone and instantly just pay and convert that into EMI. Even if your insurance covers it, you can just get a reimbursement later or whatever else, etc. Number three is transforming how you experience care, meaning if there are IoT devices that sit in your home so that they can monitor and give advanced notification to the provider, and that provider is plugged into the network so that the seamless experience happens, and you will have somebody physically present like a Swiggy boy or a Dunzo boy at that hospital who will handle your admissions all the way to your discharge. You will feel confident to sell to an elderly parent to that hospital because you've done a booking through Qube. Somebody will take care of it. The experience of care in itself. If I have to do that entire vision, I just need to create a better engagement at the provider level. I don't need to own them. I think they're doing a fantastic job anyway.
Okay. But while you say that Amazon is a marketplace, but then Amazon has that whole private labeling business,
yes,
which is increasingly, replacing the third-party brands who sell there. What would be the corollary here?
So the corollary here is that in healthcare especially, what you're looking for is the best option, the best choice. So choice is an operative word. Options are operative word. If I end up owning some of those brands and I keep pushing you towards that brand, what's the point, right? Maybe the best possible care is at I mean, just to use an example, let's say the best possible care for cardiac care is Medanta, right? And the best one for cataract might be Shroff Eye Clinic, and the best one for IVF might be another particular brand. Just because I happen to have an investment and whatever, then I'm doing a disservice to you as the user.
No,
so in
but
that sense-
you're assuming that you'll not invest in building capability into that, no? I mean, you would probably, if you buy something like, let's say you buy a diagnostic chain, a pan-India diagnostic chain, to run your the supply side, then obviously you would invest, you would use tech to make that chain better at what it does. And
Of course, but I think it comes down to the core of what we believe our business is, right? Our business is not providing better surgeries or better diagnostics. That requires a skill set of investment in resources that specialize in that. So in fact, that's what we tell our partners, at least on the diagnostic side. Invest better in making your equipment better, your phlebotomists better, your lab technicians better. Leave the sales to us. My job is to manage the sales experience, the customer experience, right? And addressing all of those queries, providing the preliminary care. That's where I want to invest in. I don't want to invest in making a better infrastructure. I mean, let's take the case of Narayana Health, right, or NH hospitals. Their obsession is to provide the best possible care at the cheapest possible price, right? And they've expanded significantly. And I think that's there are people like them that have made that their life's mission. Why would I want to try and compete with them? I'm like, okay, great, go ahead and do that because that's what you're good at. Let me manage the customer experience on this side. That's what I want to invest in. But to answer your question, if I have to invest, I will invest in AI, IoT, things that essentially do preventive, preemptive care, maybe palliative care. Those kind of technologies are very, very interesting. We become a channel because we have a large base of customers to kind of test that out. We want to invest in having more high-touch relationships so that you could be sitting in Japan, your parents are back in India, you can call up Qube Health and somebody will actually go and concierge the whole experience for them, right? That's what I want to kind of invest in.
Okay. So let me come now to the B2C part of this. Okay, before I come to that, so what kind of margins do you make in this? Like if you price something at 100 rupees for a employer, like say, or 1,000 rupees for an executive health checkup pan India, then what kind of margins do you make on this?
Obviously, I can't go into details on that, but let's put it simply that it's enough for us to be able to offer 0% interest.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So that was in fact, the next question I wanted to ask you is how are you offering a 0% interest EMI? So that's because of the price differentials.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, right? I mean, going back to my earlier point, why is it that you can buy a television and a cell phone and a washing machine at 0% EMI? Clearly, there are economics at work where the financing company, the retailer, and the manufacturer of the product have gotten together and said, let us lubricate the transaction by offering finance so that customers buy more, consume more, and everybody benefits. That's essentially the role that we are playing in health.
Mm-hmm. And are you like collaborating with a FinTech to run this, or you built your own stack on this?
No. So I think the FinTech infrastructure, there are enough fantastic companies that are out there right now. So they enable that. And so it's a collaborative piece around it.
Okay. Got it. So when people go for these services where they can do a BNPL, do they book the service also through Qube Health, or I can just like walk into any place and just pay?
You can walk into any place wherever Visa and MasterCard is accepted. It could be, Midnapur in West Bengal or Zahirabad in Telangana, Siliguri or wherever. It doesn't matter. Just go in there. That transaction is anyway routed through me. So you can pre-book it, post-book it, doesn't matter. Just walk in. Let's say you have a dog as a pet. You want to go to the veterinarian. Just go to your regular veterinarian. See if there is a Qube QR code. If there is a Qube QR code, you can scan it like GPay. Convert that into an EMI in case it's a procedure that's slightly expensive, or just swipe it. And the entire backend infrastructure is powered by Qube. Qube will then connect with you, help you figure out better options next time, and so on and so forth, and finance that entire transaction as well.
But how do you know it's not getting misused? It's not getting swiped at, let's say, whatever, at a restaurant.
Great question.
For example.
Question. So the card is enabled and tagged so that it's only accepted at medical and health establishments.
How does that happen? Talk to me about the back end of how you did this.
So it's actually it's a fairly common practice in the cards industry. There are merchant codes, right? So the merchant codes essentially define the type of business you are. So the merchant codes are enabled only to accept that. So you can't walk into a mall and or a restaurant and then swipe it. It just is not possible.
So what is like your current revenue number like? And what is the meaning of revenue in this case? Is it like the total services and packages sold?
Yes, that's right. Gross transaction value. So GTV is what we call it. Again, I can't disclose the numbers, but needless to say, within the next 12 months, we will be arguably the most dominant healthcare aggregator in the country in terms of the kind of throughput of business that we will do.
This episode of Founder Thesis Podcast is brought to you by Long Haul Ventures. Long Haul Ventures is the long haul partner for founders and startups that are building for the long haul. More about them is at www.longhaulventures.com.